The text came in at 7:14 on a Tuesday morning, and it wasn't even meant for her. Tamsin was holding Derek's phone because he'd asked her to check the weather for his drive to Barrie, and there it was, sitting right at the top of his notifications like it had every right to be there. Miss you already. Last night was everything. The sender's name was a single letter K. Tamsin read it twice, then she set the phone face down on the kitchen counter, poured Derek's coffee into his travel mug, and handed it to him when he came downstairs with his jacket half-zipped and his keys already in his hand. Looks clear all the way up the 400, she said. Beauty. Thanks, babe. He kissed her forehead without slowing down, grabbed the mug, and walked out the front door. Tamsin stood in the kitchen of the semi-detached house. In Leslieville, she'd put the down payment on 3 years ago and listened to his car pull out of the driveway. Then she sat down at the table, opened her laptop, and created a new spreadsheet. She titled it 30 and typed in the first row. Day 1, Tuesday. The text. 7:14 a.m. She did not cry. She did not call anyone. She made her bed, put on her coat, locked the door, and caught the Queen streetcar to work. What she did on that ride, staring out the window as the city scrolled past in its usual gray November blur, was begin to calculate. To understand what Tamsin Okafor-Wells did over the next 30 days, it helps to understand who she was before them. She was 29. She had a degree in public health from the University of Toronto, and a job she'd held for 4 years as a program coordinator at a harm reduction nonprofit on Dundas. She was the person in the office who remembered birthdays, who knew which grants were due, and which funders needed a personal email before the ask. She was the person at home, who scheduled the furnace inspection, and the dentist appointments and the grocery order every Sunday night, who noticed when the dish soap was running low, and replaced it before it ran out, who kept a jar of Derek's preferred instant coffee on the counter, even though she drank loose-leaf tea, and thought instant tasted like regret. Derek Mullen was 31. He worked in mid-level sales for a packaging company in Mississauga. He was 6'2", easy with strangers, the kind of man who made servers laugh and remembered cab drivers' names. When Tamsin met him at a friend's engagement party in Kensington Market 4.5 years ago, he'd been the most present person in the room. He asked her 3 questions before he said a single thing about himself. He showed up to their second date with a book she'd mentioned wanting to read. He texted back within minutes, always, and the texts were never one word. That version of Derek lasted roughly 14 months. The transition was so gradual that Tamsin didn't notice it happening, the way you don't notice a room getting cold until you're already shivering. First it was the hydro bill. She'd assumed he was paying it since the account was in his name. He wasn't. She found out when the past due notice arrived. He apologized, called himself an idiot, said he'd set up autopay. He didn't. She set it up herself 2 weeks later and moved on. Then it was groceries. Then the car insurance, both their names on the policy, both their cars, her credit card footing the whole thing, because his always seemed to be between pay cycles. Then the internet, then the streaming, then the vet bills for the cat he'd wanted, a gray tabby named Chestnut, who loved Tamsin and tolerated Derek, which, looking back, might have been the earliest sign of anything. By the time they got married, a small ceremony at Hart House with 40 guests and a reception at a Portuguese restaurant on Dundas West, Tamsin was covering roughly 80% of their shared expenses. She knew this because she tracked it. She'd always tracked it. Her mother, Felicia, had taught her to keep receipts the way other mothers taught their daughters to keep diaries. Felicia Okafor had raised 2 children alone in a rental apartment in Scarborough after Tamsin's father left when Tamsin was 6. She worked nights at a long-term care home and days as an administrative assistant at a church. She kept every receipt in a shoebox under her bed, organized by month. Money has a memory, she used to say, standing at the stove with her back to Tamsin, stirring something that smelled like home, even when people don't. Felicia would have seen through Derek in a heartbeat. Tamsin was certain of that. But Felicia had been gone for 2 years now, a cardiac event at 58, sudden and absolute, and Tamsin had handled the arrangements alone. Because Derek was at a sales conference in Calgary, and his flight home kept getting delayed. He showed up 36 hours after Felicia died. Tamsin had already signed every document, already chosen the casket, already sat in the funeral, home alone, with a woman who called her dear and handed her tissues that smelled like lavender. So when she sat on the streetcar on day 1, looking at the city and doing the math, the calculation wasn't new. It was just finally reaching its conclusion. The rules she set for herself were precise. She would continue paying her half of the mortgage. The house was in her name only, a detail Derek had never questioned and one Tamsin had never corrected. She would buy her own food. She would pay for nothing that belonged to, benefited, or was consumed exclusively by Derek Mullen. His gym membership, which had been coming off her visa since the month after the wedding. His phone plan, which she'd added him to 2 years ago, because his credit wasn't good enough for his own. His car insurance. The streaming services. The grocery runs that included his protein bars and his oat milk and his particular brand of barbecue chips that cost $6 a bag at the Loblaws on Queen. All of it, quiet as a tap turning off. She told one person. Her oldest friend, Regan So, who she'd known since the first week of undergrad, when they'd both been assigned to the same residence floor at New College, and bonded over a shared hatred of the communal bathroom and a shared love of Margaret Atwood. Regan was a family lawyer now, practicing out of a small firm on Bloor. She had 2 children, a wife named Simone, and the kind of direct, surgically calm delivery that made her terrifying in a courtroom and irreplaceable as a friend. They met at a cafe on Ossington that evening. Tamsin showed her the text. Regan looked at it for a long time. Then she set the phone down. What do you want to do? I want to see what he does when I stop. Stop what? Everything. Regan studied her face. You're not asking for my legal opinion right now, are you? Not yet. But you know where to find it. I do. Regan nodded once, the way she did when she was filing something important away. 30 days? 30 days. And if you find what you think you're going to find? Tamsin wrapped both hands around her mug. Then I'll call you for the legal opinion. Day 3 was when the first crack appeared. Tamsin came home from work to find Derek standing in front of the television, jabbing at the remote. The screen was frozen on a loading page. Did something happen to Crave? He asked, without turning around. What do you mean? It's not loading. It keeps asking for payment info. Tamsin set her bag down. She hung up her coat. She took her time. Maybe check the billing settings. I don't even know what email it's under. She knew what he was doing. Not consciously, maybe, but structurally. He was presenting a problem and waiting for her to solve it. This was the engine that had powered their entire marriage, a cycle so smooth and silent that Tamsin hadn't recognized as a machine until she deliberately turned it off. Try the one you use for everything else, she said and walked to the kitchen. Behind her, she heard him exhale. Not quite frustration. Something closer to confusion, the sound of a man encountering a locked door that had always been open. She logged it in the spreadsheet that night. Day 3, Crave. He didn't fix it. Watched YouTube on his phone instead. Day 5, the gym membership bounced. Derek mentioned it at breakfast, casual, almost amused. The gym charged my card and it declined. Weird. That is weird, Tamsin said, eating her oatmeal. Can you check if it's coming off yours? I think we set it up on your visa a while back. I'll look into it. She didn't look into it. The membership lapsed by day 8. Derek didn't renew it. He didn't mention it again. Day 7 was when Tamsin started paying attention to the smaller absences. The dish soap ran out. She bought her own bottle and kept it under the bathroom sink. The kitchen bottle stayed empty for 4 days before Derek replaced it, and when he did, he bought hand soap, not dish soap. She washed her own dishes with her own supply and let him figure out the difference on his own. He never did. On day 9. Derek's mother, Beverly, called the house. Tamsin had always been the one to coordinate Sunday dinners at Beverly's place in Oshawa, to remember the wine she liked, to text her updates about Derek's life that Derek himself never thought to share. This time, Tamsin let the call go to voicemail. Derek didn't return it for 3 days. When he finally did, Tamsin heard him in the other room saying, "Yeah, things have just been busy, Mum. You know how it is." Beverly's voice on the other end, muffled but audible, said something about Tamsin. Derek said, "She's fine. She's always fine." Tamsin wrote it down. Day 9. She's always fine. She circled it. Day 11. This was the day the experiment changed shape. Tamsin was working from home, sitting in the small office off the hallway that had originally been meant to be a shared space, but that Derek had never once used. He didn't know she was there. He assumed she was at the office because she usually left by 8, but she'd had a migraine that morning and canceled her first 2 meetings. She heard him on the phone in the living room. No, she doesn't know. Come on, Kit, give me some credit. Kit. Not K, Kit. I told you, it's complicated right now. She's been weird lately. Distant. I don't know. A pause. Thursday work, same place? Another pause and then a laugh. Low, easy, private. The laugh of a man who was enjoying himself. Tamsin had heard that laugh before. It had been directed at her once, a long time ago, in a bar in Kensington Market, on a night when he'd asked her 3 questions before saying a single thing about himself. She sat at her desk for 40 minutes after the call ended. She did not move, she did not cry. She opened the spreadsheet and typed, Day 11. Kit. Thursday. Same place. Then she called Regan. I know, Regan said before Tamsin could finish. Her voice was steady, but beneath it was something sharp, the sound of a woman who had been waiting for this call. Simone told me something 3 weeks ago and I didn't know how to bring it up. A woman from Derek's company came into her clinic. They got talking. She mentioned a guy in sales who'd been bringing the same woman to lunch at the pub across from the office, every Thursday for 2 months. Tamsin closed her eyes. I didn't tell you because I had nothing concrete, Regan continued. And I knew if I was wrong, it would poison everything. I kept hoping it would burn itself out. It didn't. No. How long have you been sitting on this? 3 weeks, Tamsin exhaled. The anger she felt wasn't directed at Regan. It was directed at the years. At every Sunday grocery run, every bill she absorbed, every time she set his coffee in his hand and he walked out the door without looking at her. Regan, yeah. I need the legal opinion now. Regan was quiet for a moment. Then, come to the office tomorrow. Bring everything. The spreadsheet, the mortgage documents, the bank records, all of it. Tamsin did. What she learned in Regan's office the next morning, sitting across from her best friend in her professional capacity for the first time, was that the shoebox habit her mother had given her, the receipts, the tracking, the meticulous records of every payment made by whom and for what, had built something Felicia Okafor probably never imagined, but would have been proud of. A paper trail so clear, so thorough, and so entirely one-sided that it constituted an airtight record of financial contribution. The mortgage is in your name, Regan said, scrolling through the documents on her screen. He's never made a payment on it, not one. The cars? Both insured under my policy. He drives the Civic. I've been paying for it since month 4. Regan leaned back. Tamsin, you've been the sole financial engine of this household for 4 years. You have documentation going back to year 1. Do you understand what that means? It means my mother was right. Regan's eyes softened for half a second. Then, the lawyer came back. It means you're not starting from nothing. You're starting from a position most people in this situation would kill for. Tamsin nodded. Draft what you need to draft. Already started. Day 14. The halfway point. Something in the house had shifted. Derek could feel it. He couldn't name it, but he orbited the edges of it like a man circling a sound he can't locate. He cooked that night. Chicken stir-fry, underseasoned, the vegetables still slightly frozen in the center. Tamsin ate it without comment. You've been quiet, he said, pushing rice around his plate. Work's been a lot, Tamsin. He set his fork down. Is there something wrong with us? She looked at him. This man she had spent 4.5 years with. This man whose coffee she made every morning, and whose name she had considered taking, and whose debts she had quietly absorbed into her own budget, like water into soil. If something were wrong with me, she said carefully, if I were drowning, what would you do? He frowned. What kind of question is that? Just answer it. He thought about it. She watched him actually think, which was rare enough to be notable. I'd ask you what was wrong. I'd try to help, and if I told you, I'd listen. She nodded. Took another bite. Okay, that's it? That's it. The thing Derek didn't understand, the thing she knew with the cold clarity of someone who has finally stopped hoping, was that he meant it. He would ask, he would listen, and then he would wait for her to solve it anyway. That was who he was. A man who identified problems and handed them back to the person who brought them up. She'd just never seen the pattern so clearly before. She typed 2 words in the spreadsheet that night. Day 14, certainty. Day 17. Tamsin did something she wasn't proud of, and the story doesn't hold together without honesty about it. She took the name Kit, the company Derek worked for, and the information she had, and she gave it to her colleague Ayo, who had a quiet talent for finding things out without leaving fingerprints. 2 days later, Io sent her a LinkedIn profile. Katara Novak, 27, Client Relations Coordinator, same company as Derek, different floor. She was pretty in the way that didn't need effort. Open face, easy smile. Something about the photo, the lightness in it, hit Tamsin in a place she hadn't expected, because she recognized the expression, not the face. The ease. The look of a woman who hasn't yet spent years carrying someone else's life on top of her own. Tamsin didn't contact her. She wanted to be clear about that, with herself and with anyone who might eventually hear this story. Katara Novak was not the problem. She was a woman who might not have known the full picture. Tamsin gave her every benefit of the doubt she could afford. The problem was the man who came home to Tamsin every night, and acted like home was something that maintained itself. She sat in her parked car outside the Shoppers on Queen for 20 minutes, staring at the profile photo. Then she called her brother. Desmond Okafor was 34, 5 years older, built like their father but steady like their mother. He lived in Montreal, worked in logistics, and spoke rarely enough that when he did, it landed like a dropped anchor. He'd never trusted Derek. Tamsin knew this because Desmond had told her exactly once at the wedding reception, in a sentence she hadn't been ready to hear. "I hope he earns you, Tam, I really do." She told him everything now. The text, the 30 days, Kit, the spreadsheet, Regan, all of it. He was quiet for a long time. "Don't move until you're ready," he said. "And when you move, move completely. No half steps, I know, I'm coming on day 30. She hadn't asked. He'd already decided. That was Desmond. Day 22 ended the experiment early. Not because Tamsin stopped it, but because Derek accelerated it. He came home that evening with a tension she'd never seen on him before. Nervous and aggressive at the same time, the specific energy of someone who suspects they've been caught but hasn't confirmed it. "Who's Io?" Tamsin looked up from the book she'd been holding. "Io from my office? Someone from your office has been asking around my company." People noticed. Io had been less discreet than she'd hoped. She felt a brief flash of frustration, then released it. "Tamsin, what is going on?" She set the book down. "Who is Kit?" The silence that followed lasted approximately 4 seconds, but Tamsin felt every fraction of everyone. She watched Derek's face cycle through 5 distinct expressions. Confusion, calculation, denial forming behind his eyes, the rapid assessment of whether it could hold, and then the collapse. The moment when a lie recognizes it has nowhere left to land. "It's not what you don't." One word. He stopped. "I have been carrying this household for 4 years, Derek. Every bill, every payment, every subscription, every grocery run, every vet appointment for the cat you wanted, every phone plan and car insurance payment and hydro bill that was supposed to be yours." Her voice stayed level. She was proud of that. "While you were spending Thursdays with someone else." "Tamsin, let me explain." "I'm sure you can explain. I'm sure you're very good at it." She stood up. "But I don't need the explanation. I already have everything I need." She walked to the bedroom and locked the door. What Derek didn't know, what she hadn't told anyone except Desmond, was what she'd been building behind the structure of those 30 days. 3 weeks before day 1, before the text, before she even had language for what she suspected. She'd sat down with Regan for a conversation that wasn't between friends. It was between a client and her lawyer. They'd gone through the mortgage, the bank records. 4 years of receipts her mother had taught her to keep, the credit history, the asset breakdown. Regan had reviewed everything, thorough and clinical. "You've been the documented primary financial contributor for the entirety of this marriage," Regan said. "The mortgage is solely in your name. The paper trail is clean." She paused and looked at Tamsin with something that was no longer professional. "You're not starting from zero, Tam. You're starting from exactly where you built yourself to be." That conversation happened before the text, before Kit, before any of it. Tamsin had known, somewhere underneath all the love and the hope and the Sunday grocery runs, that she might eventually need a way out. She'd spent 4 years praying she wouldn't. On the morning of day 23, she texted Regan 2 words: "Move forward." Regan replied in under a minute, "Already filed." That afternoon, Tamsin opened a new account at a credit union Derek had never heard her mention. She redirected her direct deposit. She called the mortgage servicer and began a formal sole ownership confirmation. She started boxing up anything in the house that was his and stacking the boxes neatly in the guest room. Derek came home that evening to a woman making tea and asking about his day. He didn't understand that the calm he was seeing was not peace. The calm was architecture. Day 30. Desmond arrived at Pearson at 8:15 in the morning and was at the house by 9:30. He looked like their mother, broad and still, the kind of man whose silence filled a room without trying. Derek had always been slightly uneasy around him. Tamsin finally understood why. Desmond had never once been fooled by performance. He hugged her at the door, held it for a beat longer than usual, then pulled back and looked at her face. "There she is," he said quietly. She hadn't known how badly she needed someone to see her. The three of them sat in the living room. Chestnut was on Tamsin's lap, purring. Derek sat on the opposite couch, his body rigid, his hands clasped between his knees. Tamsin spoke first. "For 30 days I stopped managing everything that was yours to manage. I watched what happened when I did." She let that settle. "You noticed the streaming service before you noticed me." Derek's jaw tightened. "I found Kit," she continued. "I know the timeline, I know enough." She paused. "I've been working with a lawyer. The mortgage, the accounts, 4 years of financial records, everything's been reviewed. We're moving forward with the separation." Desmond sat beside her, not performing support, just present. Solid. The way Felicia would have been if she were still here. Derek looked between the two of them. Something moved through his face that Tamsin hadn't seen before. Not anger, not denial, something structural. The expression of a man realizing that the building he'd been living in had been load-bearing on one side the entire time. So that's it? That's it. He sat there for a long time. She watched him cycle through it, the guilt, the exposure, the wounded pride, before something settled into what looked, for the first time, like genuine shame. Not performed, not strategic, just the plain, ugly recognition of what he'd done and what he'd lost. He left that evening with 2 suitcases and a garbage bag of clothes. Chestnut watched him from the window ledge and didn't meow once. Tamsin sat on the back porch with Desmond until the sky went dark over the rooftops of Leslieville. The air was cold, proper November cold, and she could see her breath when she spoke. "Mum would have loved this porch," Desmond said. "She would have told me to sweep it." He laughed. She laughed. It felt like the first real sound she'd made in months. "Proud of you, Tam." "I'm proud of me too." She meant it completely. It has been 91 days since day 30. The divorce is proceeding. Regan is steady and sharp and worth every hour. The financial records Tamsin kept, the ones Derek used to roll his eyes at, calling her obsessive for filing receipts and logging every transaction into a color-coded spreadsheet, turned out to be the architecture of her own freedom. The house is hers. It always was. Regan and Simone had Tamsin over for dinner last week. Simone made jollof rice, and Regan opened a bottle of wine that cost more than it needed to. They didn't talk about Derek. They talked about a camping trip to Algonquin they were planning for the summer, and whether Tamsin wanted to come. She said yes before Regan finished the sentence. "Desmond calls every Sunday. He doesn't say much. He doesn't need to. He asks if she's eaten. He asks if the furnace is working. He tells her he loves her in that Desmond way, which is to say he doesn't say the words, he just keeps showing up." Io apologized for being sloppy with the investigation. Tamsin forgave her because the information had mattered more than the method, and because Io brought her a coffee the next morning with a sticky note that said his loss and a drawing of a cat. Tamsin doesn't know what happened with Kit. She doesn't need to. Katara Novak was never her problem, and spending energy on someone else's choices was exactly the pattern she was trying to break. What she knows is this. The 30 days didn't end her marriage. They illuminated it. There is a difference between something falling apart and something being seen clearly for the first time. A thing that falls apart was once whole. A thing that is seen clearly was always exactly what it was. You just finally found the courage to open your eyes all the way. Her mother told her something once, standing in the kitchen of the Scarborough apartment, flour on her hands, not looking at Tamsin but meaning every word. "Tamsin, you have too much of yourself to keep folding down for someone who refuses to stand up." Mama, she hears her now. She is not bitter. Bitterness would mean she is still spending energy on Derek Mullen, and she doesn't have a single calorie left for that. She is free. She planted something new. This time she planted it in soil that belongs to her, in a house that carries only her name, in a city that has always felt like hers, in a life she no longer has to share with someone who never learned how to carry his half. Chestnut is asleep on the radiator. The porch light is on. The spreadsheet is closed,